war in Ukraine will become a defining moment in our lifetimes, and one can be sure that it will have a profound effect on the way we look at that huge nation spanning two continents, Russia. An ethnically, religiously, and culturally diverse nation. I remember thinking once the war started that it was important to study a region so vast yet mysterious to the general populace. I wondered, what makes Russia Russia? One of the key moments in modern history was its revolution and the way Russia tried to navigate through a rapidly changing world. That is why I decided to dedicate my channel to making a series about the Russian Revolution in order to get some understanding as to why Russia has become the Russia we see today. Now, before we go into the revolution itself, it is important to know what Russia was like before the revolution even started. In learning about history, context is everything. So we can start at 1917, when the revolution started, at least according to most historians. We have to go back at least 50 years, even before the coronation of Nicholas II in 1896 to Alexander II. First of all, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment and tap the notification bell.
Как и среди русских, как и среди всех.
Imagine Europe during the late 19th century, a continent that was exploring and developing at a very high rate. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Ideas about government and rule were spreading very fast. It was a time of change, empire, and rapid development. Although Russia had started its industrialization, for some reason Russia remained the exception to this rule, and largely remained an agrarian and feudal nation. Russia was huge, at one point controlling parts of 3 continents. The most important reason for this discrepancy was because of the lack of labor due to centuries of exploitation, but more importantly, the complete unwillingness of the elite to modernize. Many thought Russia should stay pure, in the sense that it should not involve itself with Western decadence. However, the elite was also aware that Russia should modernize in order to survive. The only question was, how? Tsar Alexander II, who is also called Tsar Liberator for good reason, in a way kick-started many political reforms which were unpopular with the Russian nobility. Many of the reforms gnawed at the power of the nobility, a nobility that was necessary for all the liberalization efforts of Tsar Alexander. Despite this difficulty, he did manage to loosen up censorship, established independent courts of law, and reinstituted academic freedom. He also finally did something about the serfdom that was still very much in place. 46 million of a 60 million population still lived under serfdom. Alexander II set out the Edict of Emancipation in 1861 in which the serfs were promised to be freed within the next 2 to 5 years. The serfs, however, actually wanted to own the land they had been working on and had fertilized with their own blood, sweat, and tears. And because this would make the landed nobility go bankrupt immediately, the serfs were forced to purchase the land they had been working on, a compromise no one was fond of. Of course, the serfs got very angry, and the army had to deal with at least one riot each day. Another very important factor was that a new class was forming with the growth of the cities, a class neither farmer nor nobility, but an educated class. By mixing Russian and Western culture, this class would form one of the foundations of the revolution. Now, new ideals were pounding at the door of the old traditional order. Alexander, although an enlightened despot, still a despot, reacted with repression, only further propelling these new ideals, which resulted in radicalism, which resulted in terrorism, which resulted in the assassination of Alexander II. His successor possibly made things worse for the Romanov dynasty. Alexander III, influenced by his fanatical teacher, Konstantin Pobedonostsev, repressed many of the ethnic minorities, mostly the Jews, and actually furthered his repression both against academia but also against liberalization efforts by taxing the farmers into oblivion, using the money to get things necessary from the West. As his Minister of Finance would say, let's starve, but also export. When Alexander died in 1894, his son Nicholas II succeeded his father. Before we continue, I'd like to notice that approximately 90% of my viewers are not subscribed to my channel. It would help me quite a lot if you did. Let's see if we can get to 50 subscribers by the end of July. In order to understand the person Nicholas II was, I'd like to quote from a book I read some time ago, and I think this describes his personality quite accurately. It goes as follows. The time of the succession of Alexander III, was a time in which the Russian Empire needed a Tsar with the willpower of Peter the Great, the spirit of Catherine, the savviness of Dmitry Donskoy, the reformist attitude of Alexander II, and a whiff of the iron conviction of Nicholas I. Instead, the empire got a man without any imagination in his conservatism, who wavered in his convictions, who was weak against strong-willed people and imperious against people who had the best intentions. He himself did not have the feeling he was prepared to take the throne. What is going to happen with me and all of Russia? He asked his cousin Grand Duke Alexander the night before his coronation. Well, what? He belonged to the worst kind of leaders, foolish and with a strong sense of duty. If the circumstances were to be different, Nicholas could have saved the monarchy. He could have tried and pushed the establishment of a constitution, but he didn't. Had he done this, he might have been able to cater to the growing intelligentsia, the growing progressive voices throughout the empire, and by doing so, isolate the revolution. Instead, he caved in to the pressure at the court and the conservative voices of the nobility, and by doing so, stuck to tradition. To add insult to injury, Russia had to deal with a famine in 1891, leaving the population hungry. According to historian Orlando Figes, in regards to both personality and appearance, the Tsar more resembled his cousin George V, who was the constitutional monarch of Great Britain, a role in which it was only expected to be a good man, perfect for the tasks of a ceremonial constitutional monarch. But Nicholas was emperor and autocrat of Russia, Poland, Ukraine, etc., etc. According to Figes, this was the main cause of the fall of the monarchy. The monarchy fell not because of the anger of the farmers and laborers, nor the nationalist separatist movements at the fringes of the empire. Figes quotes Trotsky saying that a revolution is an interplay between objective and subjective factors. Respectively, these are human suffering and misery on one hand, and human vigor on the other. The famine of 1891, that took place due to unfortunate meteorological circumstances, wasn't enough for a revolutionary movement to take shape. Despite the few riots that did take place, these weren't fertile grounds for a revolution. More so, it was the disregard of the elite to cater towards the expectation of the newly formed civil class. The Tsar, however, wasn't interested in ruling over a constitutional monarchy, but clinged to ruling as an autocrat. Russia was a country that was rife with the smell of change in the air. New social classes took shape. Farmers became merchants. Merchants were raised to nobility status. At the fringes of the empire, the formation of nationalist movements started to take shape. It was also a hard-hearted nation, with complete disregard for the lower classes, which were forced to purchase the land they worked on earlier. Corporal punishment was the norm for not adhering to the law, even though legally the civil law did not protect the farmers. They were only protected by common law, and life on the farms was rough. And even though the most anger came from the farmers, no government authority was present, although the repression at the hands of the nobility prevailed. A separate video could be made about the coronation itself, because from the moment the crown was put on Nicholas's head, things went south. 4 days after the coronation ceremony, a huge public feast was organized in honor of the crowning of the new Tsar, which resulted in the deaths of 1,389 people and the wounding of another 1,300 due to an ensuing stampede. The populace was hungry and probably needed the food. It became known as the Godinka tragedy. The reaction of Nicholas was apathetic, and coronation events continued as planned. On the night of the same day, Nicholas attended a ball at the French embassy. Yes, he attended a party the same night. 1,389 people died. At this point, The cities were rife with revolutionary ideas due to the fact that these had grown significantly and ideas were spread rapidly. People were hungry and angry. Only a spark was needed to make this explode, and that spark would come from the Far East. Due to the aggressive eastward expansion of Russia, the empire got into conflict with Japan. Japan was fed up with the aggressive expansion and was seething due to the near completion of the Trans-Siberian Railway. They initiated a surprise attack at Port Arthur. The war was initially seen as an opportunity to boost patriotism and national pride in hard times. The war against Japan became everything but. Due to the utter incompetence of the Russian military officers who cling to a 19th century military doctrine, along with bayonet and cavalry charges, the Russians were completely embarrassed. From the first shots fired, the Russian Pacific Navy got annihilated. The Japanese, a rapidly industrializing power in the region at the time, advanced on both land and at sea. Nicholas ordered the Baltic Fleet to set sail for the Pacific, and this story is both tragic as it is comical. After postponing the journey to the Pacific due to issues with the engines of the fleet finally set sail on the 15th of October 1904. When arriving at the Doggerbank off the coast of England on the 21st of October, the fleet mistook some fishing boats for Japanese naval ships and assaulted them, only to damage one of their own cruisers and only sinking one fishing boat. After the 7-month journey to the Pacific, this fleet also got annihilated. War with Britain got avoided in the slightest. Overall, the result of the war was an obvious Japanese victory, and one might say that this failure on Russia's part would come to bite Russia in a later era. Russia had to abandon their expansionist policies in the Far East, and Japan got the consent to colonize Korea, later resulting in its annexation. The treaty signed after the war, known as the Treaty of Portsmouth, confirmed the Japanese status as the preeminent power in East Asia. A victory might have turned the tide for Nicholas a bit, and might have saved his legitimacy as ruler. Now the Tsar could only depend on his divine right to rule. When the war went completely sideways, and it became clear that the war was a disaster, the liberals in the country started to turn against the government and used the failed war as a means to push for reforms. Even the big industrials of the nation, which were always protected by the government, started to turn a 180. The liberals presented a list of resolutions to the Tsar, which he declined. He saw these reforms as dangerous for the people that God had put in his care. It was a sunny Sunday, on the 9th of January 1905. The popular priest Grigory Gapon carries a petition reading as follows: We, the citizens of St. Petersburg, originating from different classes, appeal, along with our women, our children, and our elderly, to you, sire, for justice and protection. We are poor, we are suppressed, we have to toil endlessly, and we are treated with contempt. we choke in all of this despotism and lawlessness. Carrying a white banner saying, "Soldiers don't shoot the people," the protesters marched towards the Varna gate. All of a sudden, they were attacked by cavalry. Some fled, others kept marching. 3 shots were fired, 2 serving as warning shots. The third fired at protesters, after which the soldiers kept on firing. Gapon was trampled and fell down, but got up, and some reported him exclaiming, "God is no more. The Tsar is no more." An old man was reported saying the following. With anger in his voice, he spoke to a 14-year-old boy. "Remember this, son. Remember this and swear you will make the Tsar pay for this. You have seen the bloodshed he caused. So swear, boy, swear." This sunny Sunday became known as Bloody Sunday. A nation already rife with the smell of change was now rife with revolution. The spark became a fire running slowly. Lenin would describe this moment in history as the general rehearsal for 1917. According to Lenin's analysis of 1905, 3 things were made clear. First, the complete bankruptcy of the bourgeoisie's ability and her liberal parties to stand up to the Tsarist autocracy. Second, the huge revolutionary potential of the agrarian class. And third, the extent to which the nationalist movements at the fringes of the empire were capable to weaken the empire. Throughout the nation, riots and strikes started to erupt. The position of the Tsar was in a dire state. Thank you so much for watching. In the next episode, we will look into the 1905 revolution and the defining moments leading up to the First World War and its effects on Russia, as well as a mysterious man coming from the East. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and click the notification bell. Talk to you all